Good morning. It's a beautiful day. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us. I'm your host, Jon Cox. This is the Core Keyword Podcast, episode number 2. Joining me on the panel this evening is the editor, Don Plumlee, our four-armed overlord, Peyton Preece, and the captain of the Hogs of War, Daddy Smurf himself, Howard Watts. On today's show, in part 1, the panel will discuss the changes in the data slate. Then, in part 2 on Touching Grass with Ben talks to us about nutrition on game day. And finally, the panel returns in part 3 to talk about more of those 10th edition updates. So stay tuned, sit back, relax, and grab some snacks. And welcome to part 1 of the Core Keyword Podcast, episode number 2. GW has dropped the fire on us from on high with another one of those data slate thingies. This one is just a rules update. Doesn't seem to have any points attached. Lots of things changed. Dark Angels got nuked from orbit amongst one. Guys, how are we feeling about this data slate? Some of you guys got some games in since the last time that I've talked to you, and some of those games were with the data slate. So how is it panning out? Are Dark Angels just dead or what?
I think Dark Angels are still a top 3 Marine chapter. But and other news, praise the Four-Armed Emperor. I thought GSC were going to get at least minimum 3 nerfs, and we only got 1. And it doesn't really matter because behind enemy lines is still broken.
It's not a nerf, Peyton. It's not even a nerf. You don't even care. You still have a 15-second. You're just like, oh, I just do this other thing instead that's the same. This is dope.
Yeah, it's great. So, in other news, I am not off Gene Stealer Cult for the rest of the edition. It'll be fantastic.
I'm sure that we're all thrilled to hear that. We are all very glad you get to have blips for the next 4 months.
I love the deployment phase. This is so good.
All blips.
Blips are fair and balanced mechanic. They make the game fun and interactive. It's a grand old time.
So the best part about Peyton and I's game is like, Peyton, I'll have you be the defender. So you deploy first so that you don't have as much information since I'm playing Chaos Knights. And he's like, I'm just deploying blips, bro. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Did you just tell the internet that you played Chaos Knights?
I did.
Well, while the Inquisition goes to hunt down the famed
here
son of Macrog.
Yep, here it comes. Ward is now a dead man. The Emperor's servants are coming for him.
From the Tyranid or the Hive Mind perspective, I do appreciate that we can now be adaptive with our adaptive traits. That's neat. Thanks, G-Dubs. Also, love that my Hive Tyrant doesn't have to be the Warlord, so he can actually be freaking useful. That's pretty cool. However, it is still rough playing like 1,500 points of army for 2,000 points. So that's still a thing.
Did you take Harpies?
Not this weekend, brother. I actually took Gaunts for the first time in my career as a Hive Mind player.
Riblees.
They were cool.
I'm sorry, what's a Gaunt? I don't think I've seen those since 7th.
It's Gaunt's Ghost.
Yeah, I took Gaunts Ghosts as an allied in for Tyranids.
Oh.
Really good. It's really good. They've got like, I don't know, things that guard guys have. Whatever.
Yeah, they've got like guns and rules and they hold objectives, right?
Oh no, I didn't have any of that. This is a different thing. My bad.
Oh, okay, all right. But seriously, no, the data slate changed a lot. I don't know that it's going to be super different. I was pretty excited though for the Rukari players to be able to get their Kronos and Talos back, so that's pretty cool. I don't know if anybody's going to play them because I don't know if they're worth playing. But
yeah, let me jump in on that real quick. It is adorable that Kronos and Talos
it's really cute.
have Core back. It's adorable, and I love it. It's a completely meaningless change. They cannot compete in this meta. They still nerfed the -1 damage trait at the same time to where it doesn't work against strength 8. And in a meta when literally every Marine has a melta-gun, -1 damage at strength 7 or less doesn't really matter. Tacking on to that your people are having to tech for killing vehicles. And in this meta, and they weren't back then. That was part of the reason why Thick City was so good, was people weren't teching to kill vehicles at the time. But you have to be able to kill Russes right now, which are just a better profile Talos. Just really don't see the impact that change will have. There were a couple changes that I did see that I am actually pretty happy for, and that is the Codex Warfare change, because I think it actually impacts the oppressive factions, and the broadside change I think can actually do some cool things in Tau. But
so speaking as the resident Marine player for
former Marine player,
whatever, that's not true. I gotta agree with Peyton. Like, although I was 100% abusing and utilizing Codex Warfare for a 15, it's just healthier overall that you don't have like Iron Hands and like the Codex Warfare version of Iron, or rather Dark Angels, that's not just Terminator spam. Like it brings them a little bit more in line. That, and as an Ultramarine player, like we have a lot of ways to manipulate doctrines through like relics and warlord traits and various generic Space Marine stratagems in addition to Ultramarine specific stratagems. That coupled with the new FAQ that allows you to use stuff like adaptive strategy to score points in Devastator, tactical, and assault, depending. I think it's a pretty healthy change. Will you see the majority of Space Marine chapters taking it? No. But I think it still has play for like a 10-point to 12-point, probably reliably, as long as you're built for it, as a possibility. But I like the Codex Warfare change, even as a Marine player.
I mean, I think it's a solid change. Goes from an auto 15 to something that you have to work for.
Yeah. And really, that's where I prefer secondaries to be. If something's an auto 15 and it's something that you're like, it's meant to be a secondary objective, right? So if your secondary just goes with what you were going to be doing, trying to score primary, it just becomes, well, I'm just going to play the primary and score 100 points, and my opponent's not going to have any way to interact with it. I think that's just a flaw in the design space that GW is hopefully at least take into account for 10th edition whenever that comes out. So
yeah, I'm in agreement there. I think that, for it to be an interesting choice or an interesting deviation in the way that the game is played, it has to cost you some resources, right? There has to be some opportunity cost there to get those points. You can't just double down on what you're doing as part of your overall plan and just get them along the way for it to be an interesting interaction point or piece of gameplay.
No, I agree with all of that. My qualm is, while they changed Codex Warfare, I don't think that impacts the reigning boogeyman in the meta. Like, yeah, sure, Dark Angels got the Inner Circle nerf, which is, I mean, just gone, right? But Iron Hands, yeah, they don't have the auto 15 from Codex Warfare, but that doesn't really matter if they just shoot you off the board by turn 2. So, does it really impact them in their game? I would argue no.
That's probably more of an issue with Desolators being like pretty pushed. When a non-shooting Marine chapter can just spam Desolators and make your opponent's day suck, like, it's because the data sheet's the issue. Now, with Iron Hands with Desolation Marines coming out, that would be even more of a problem. And you saw that at the whatever UK event that was, where like the top 8 or top 10 was like 80 something Desolation Marines. It was silly. Or 40 or whatever it was, top 5.
Top 5 was 45. That was Manchester. That was absurd. Yeah. Sorry, Jon Cox.
Oh no, you're quite all right. I was going to say, it turns out when the data sheet is pretty pushed that they tend to show up in number.
Oh, I think we would have seen them in greater numbers if they'd been more available. I mean, that was the first event that they'd even been accessible, really, and they were only available in that starter box, right?
Limited release, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're hitting the point where, I mean, everybody's got, well, not everybody, but a lot of folks running Space Marines have 10, 15, 20 Desolators sitting in their back wings just pumping out consistent damage to whatever's on the board.
I just really don't want to hobby them. Like, I have 10 because I bought an Agostic Strike Force box. But I just feel like I'd be painting dead models. They're going to be adjusted, and I'm like, I don't want to spend my hobby time for them to just get nerfed into the ground, which I feel like is what's going to happen.
See, I'm not sure that's going to happen. Listening to some coverage of that Manchester event, we're discussing. Apparently, there were several GW reps there playing at the event, and they were under the impression that Desolation Marines were 100% fine and or underpowered, whereas a lot of the top players were doing the opposite, you know? So I think we probably won't see a nerf of Desolation Marines till the first data slate at 10th.
Unless they get an inadvertent nerf in the transition from 10th or over to 10th, right? Like maybe indirect just in general gets trash shafted in the transition to 10th. Like, I would be okay with that. Like, we don't need indirect fire. That's the thing that doesn't need to exist in the game.
I actually like indirect fire as a rule, but I want it to work like Tyranid indirect fire, where you can't shoot it unless you have line of sight with a synapse creature. Say you have to have line of sight with something else to be able to effectively have a spotter mechanic for indirect fire. So that way you can't direct someone hiding behind a ruin in their back point. You can keep like mortars safe and be able to shoot them. I like that mechanic at the concept, but just being able to shoot the entire table without any effort.
I mean, that's how it's done in real life. So speaking from experience, you don't shoot artillery unless you can observe where those rounds are going to land. So
what, you're telling me that you just don't blindly fire into the nether and be like, yeah, got him, Cap?
Yep, 2 points for Codex Warfare.
Sometimes it feels like GW is shooting into the void. Anyway.
Oh, man.
I just really don't understand how they can have such a disconnect between their rules people and what's happening in the game. Like, there's got to be some cognitive dissonance there. Like, that I just don't get how you can see the results and what's in the lists and not realize that there's a problem.
Well, it depends on how much you want to deep dive into the data, right? So looking into things like, if we just look at a Space Marine win rate, right? They sit it consistently right now. Even before this data slate, they were consistently at a 52% win rate. And then if you break that down to certain chapters, their hands go up to about a 61, 62% win rate. It doesn't get like really, really, really oppressive until you break that down even further into whether you're playing pure chapter or successor. Once you get into the correct successors, then you jump into the 70, 75% win rate, which is when it's really, really, really bad. But frequently they just glaze over the first layer of data and use that to balance things, and you don't see the actual issue, you know?
Yeah, it's, if they're not going to get granular with it, then you're not ever going to get a really good balance pass. But I mean, I guess Whirlwind of Rage is just something they're not looking at.
Well, I think it's explicitly hard with Space Marines, right? Like, you've got how many divergent chapters with various rules interactions, and then all of those have access to the same pool of successor chapter traits, which are more or less effective depending on what their other traits are, right? I mean, I remember Space Wolves when I first started playing them. The secret mojo was that +1 to hit, 6s explode for that double 6s explode action. That was never going to be nerfed. But if you played Space Wolves in that way, you could get a pretty solid win rate. Like, your clapback was just almost oppressive. You're like, oh, I got one dude left, but he's going to wipe your squad. That's fine.
So what would you say is the most positive outcome aside from the Codex Warfare change of this data slate?
So
the Deathwing Transhuman, in my opinion. That was just over the top.
okay, so I want to point out something here. Or have you ever played into 40 plus Terminators of Deathwing Transhuman?
I don't even want to hear it, Mr. Rerolls. No, like, your perspective is freaking skewed because you're like, oh, I hit on 4s, I wound on 4s, that's fine. 70% conversion rate. I'll just do that twice, right? Like, I'll just do it twice. No worries. Okay, cool. High five, dog. Right? Like, no, the rest of us are like, oh, I've got 8 shots. They hit on 3s. You got this -1 to hit banner. Cool. Screw me. So hit on 4s. Okay, I hit 3 of them. Normally I'd wound on 2s, but now 4s arbitrarily. Oh, super, super cool. 2 of those wound. You saved them both. Awesome. Okay, well, let's do this next round, except I won't have this gun to shoot you anymore.
No, I was just messing with Ward because, I mean, it's spot on. That change helps the health of the game significantly.
I've just dodged it. I just dodged the toxicity.
I played that matchup one time. I killed one model, guys.
All right, no, Cox. I played that matchup at least twice, probably 3 times in different events, and I killed every one of those shitbag Terminators in at least one of those, and god dang, that was a slog. Oh my lord. And the only reason that worked is because the mindset of playing that army is just, I guess I go here, I'm gonna take a nap over here till it's my turn. Okay, cool beans.
Maybe I should look into playing Dark Angels then. The idea of taking a nap appeals.
That's okay. I'll continue to push the idea of 40K as an Excel sheet to you. But I really like that change. And the other change, it hasn't made a ton of waves or anything, but it is a chapter that has always tempted me. I have tempted other players with it. It has been slacking slightly, but I really like it. I really, really like the Death Watch changes. Their chapter, I feel, has suffered from not having top players playing them at the moment. And this change gets them back into a mid-range of Marine chapters, which will be really cool. Combined with their secondary getting significantly improved, I think they're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, so like Coal Order, because Peyton has tempted me with Death Watch, and it has been successful. It's in process. It's just an army I want to spend a lot of time on, and like make sure that like each Marine unit kind of has like a certain feel to it, because Death Watch has so much customizability and just make it look like really, really well painted and stuff. So it's not something that's on like the near future. But when Peyton and I were talking about it, I was like, oh, Coal Order seems like it would be a good secondary. And he's like, yeah, man, but your opponent starts by picking one battlefield group. Then you pick one, and then they pick one. And it's like you only get 5 points if you kill every single one of that battlefield. Well, all that takes is like, I'm just going to be cheeky and put this guy into strategic reserves, like either via stratagem or whatever, bring him back in turn 5 where you don't have any way to get to him. Cool, -5 points. And then say the battle goes poorly and then you can't kill the other battlefield role, you're stuck with a 5. Now, with that change, if you kill a single unit or model with that battlefield role, you get 3 points. So it makes it less like just not as bad if you don't convert at least one kill of each battlefield.
Right, looking at the way that Deathwatch builds armies and the way that they just end up playing the game, it lets you build into oaths and shock tactics as consistent 12 to 15s. And then this is a secondary, I think, is a very consistent 11. Because the one category you get to pick, you'll kill everything out of, that's 5. And then kill one unit of each other category, that's 3 and 3. So that's a consistent 11. And a consistent 11 on your third secondary feels amazing.
Yeah.
For attrition-based factions, at least.
I don't even understand that feeling.
I was like, what's it like to have a double-digit scoring secondary?
To have multiple of them? God, you guys are like King Midas over here. You just touch secondaries and print points. And I'm like, I might be able to get a 6 on this one. This is pretty cool. This is a good one, this game.
My favorite, a while back when we played Don, you're like, I'm going to raise the banners. And I'm, like, cool, I'm going to kill your gargoyles. And you're like, I can't raise banners down.
That is a downfall of playing Monster Mash Tyranids.
Well, the main reason that Tyranids can't get, beyond about 6 points on secondaries because they run out of fingers and they have to start working with toes and then they're just laying on their back counting.
We don't have fingers. We only have so many tentacles. And, we won't get into why we limit the amount of tentacles, but you can imagine.
It's so that it doesn't sell well in Japan.
Oh, it sells real well in Japan.
Bum, bum,
oh my. Back to Deathwatch for a second. I really did like the change to where they can just switch to Doctrine turn to turn. I don't know how much it's really going to matter. Like, because I don't know. I just feel like there's still like a couple of rungs down from being able to convert, being able to just pick which Doctrine they're in into consistent damage output.
And that's something Peyton and I talked about. Like, Deathwatch, you have to really have a feel for what you anticipate the game state is going to be. It really is like playing chess. Because if you have the top of the turn and you go first, you don't have to worry about it because you get to change your doctrine or you get to change your doctrine in addition to changing your chapter tactic at the top of the battle round. Right? If you go second, you have to anticipate one round ahead of time where the game state is going to be at, or like, man, I think that I need to like have something combat related because I think he's going to make combat, or I think I need to pick this chapter tactic for this reason or this one for this reason. It going second with Deathwatch is very, very, very cerebral.
Well, I think that there's some other play there, though, Ward. Like, you can kind of control, at least to an extent, where your opponent moves and positions and how they engage just by the chapter tactics and the doctrines that you pick at this point, right? Like, if you want to deter them from engaging you in melee, you just go into a melee heavy focus, right? You're like, okay, I mean, I guess come on, bring it over here.
Yeah, but what I mean by that is like a good player would just be like, oh, cool. I know he has this. I don't even think the Army of Renown is even a thing anymore. But like back when the Army of Renown was a thing, like if you went second and you picked Imperial Fist, hey, he's probably about to make a play with all of his bolter stuff to have exploding sixes and auto wounding on a hit. So I probably should mitigate that. Like it just becomes telegraphed going second.
Yeah. And Deathwatch actually has a lot of ways for explosive damage between like the beacon and the tome. And being able to utilize those in the correct way in every given matchup is a really hard thing to do. I still hold that Deathwatch is the hardest chapter to play. And thus when a lot of the top Deathwatch players move to other things like Iron Hands because they're just strictly superior in a given meta, win rate suffers incredibly. I do think Deathwatch still has the tools to win a major or a GT. They just suffer from lack of player base, like Ultramarines have done historically, right? Because Ultramarines are a starter army. A lot of times they don't have top-tier players playing them right at a given moment, so their win rate is historically a little bit lower than other chapters. But obviously, as current company can prove, Ultramarines are well capable of performing extremely well and or winning GTs and majors.
And you really catch people off guard. But
yeah, you really do catch people off guard, or maybe it's the toga that's catching people off guard. Who knows? We'll figure it out.
It's the sexual harassment.
okay.
Oh my.
Oh, darn.
All right, fellas. So do we have any more thoughts about GW's latest attempt at data slate?
I think I'd give it an overall B. I think they did a pretty good job. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like the best data slate they've ever done, but they adequately identified some problem areas and made adjustments. Some of which, like Peyton said, like maybe not as bad as they could have been, but they at least saw that, hey, this secondary needs adjustment. So does this one, this one, this one. Let's do this. And then obviously as a player base, we're going to find whatever we like that pushes whatever rules weren't adjusted. So, I mean, that's just kind of how competitive play works. Find your lane and spam it and push it however you can.
Looking at this, it comes through about what I expected of it. Extremely light touches, just enough to get the very, very top end of the meta settled down a little bit. My interpretation of it is this is as minimal changes we can make tonight to write out the edition, because our entire rules team is working on 10th. Which I'm perfectly on board with. I knew it was going to be a lighter data slate than some of the previous ones, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it.
I mean,
Okay.
it's fine. Thanks for letting me not have my tyrant as a warlord, I guess. It's whatever. I'll just keep getting shit kicked by Iron Hands for another 3 weeks.
6.
And on that note, folks, we're going to go ahead and move into Touching Grass with Ben, where Ben is going to tell us how to live a healthier life while we play with our toy soldiers. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
This is Touching Grass with Ben, where I, Ben, sit down and talk to you about the importance of physical fitness and nutrition in 40K. Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of Touching Grass with Ben. This week we're going to be talking about healthy options for foods, snacks, and drinks while you are playing that weekend tournament. Whether that's an RTT or a GT, we want to help make sure that your minds are as sharp as they possibly can be. So first we're going to talk about your breakfast options. So a good start for breakfast can include a really good whole grain. Basically what whole grains are going to be doing is they're going to be increasing the cognitive thinking inside of your brain by providing the glucose that your brain is going to be burning throughout the tournament weekend. So different options that you can have for this for breakfast comes in the form of oatmeals, a wheat bran, or some kind of whole grain low processed bread. If you want to think about a solid breakfast for the morning, consider this. You can be having a whole grain toast to be providing those carbs and glucose. You can slap some eggs in there. That way you're getting as much of that protein out as you can. And then on top of that, or underneath it, depending on how you want to make your food, you can put some avocados. So you can just have that general millennial avocado toast with eggs. And basically they're going to be doing is the avocados provide vitamin C and B6, which we talked about last week, as well as omega-3 fatty acids. And fatty acids are very key for all of the cells in our body to be functioning as best they can. And that classic talk about the mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell. This is where this is going to be really important. And then when it comes to actually being at the event, or just kind of like things to think about while you're going through your day or your morning routine, the morning of, something that you probably never thought that I was going to say is you can be eating beets. Beets have been shown to increase blood flow as well as blood oxygen levels, even after just like one small serving, whether that's a beet juice or dried beets, whatever it is. As a runner, it is basically a legal performance enhancing drug. Like it is crazy the science that has been shown of what beets can do compared to other performance enhancing drugs without nearly any side effects, really no side effects at all. And it's off the shelf. It is literally just something that you can buy. From there, you can just be eating those. Basically, it's going to be helping your all that the fresh oxygenated blood, and more of it getting put into your brain allows for it to stay fresh and not get fatigued as fast. And basically, what that's going to be doing is going to be providing you with a longer day of sharp, easy thinking. Then throughout easy protein snacks throughout the games, and really just kind of like any kind of snack. I'm probably the only person that's listening or making this podcast that has watched a professional marathon start to finish. And yes, I know I'm crazy for doing that. But the second biggest factor in a great marathon besides your aerobic ability is your nutritional intake throughout the race. Whether a runner is running that marathon in 2 hours, 1 minute, or if you're running that 26.2 miles in 6 hours plus, all those athletes are needing to take in fuel in order to keep their body functioning at a baseline, as well as at the ability to continue to run each step of the way. And the same principle should be applied to us tabletop gamers. We're standing, we're thinking, we're moving for up to 6 hours, 8 hours a day for 2 days straight. And having only 1 or 2 big meals throughout that time is definitely not enough to keep you on your toes and ready to make a comeback in that Game 5 nail biter. So things to consider: protein bars, they're great. Basically just going to be fueling your body's ability to continue to work. Trail mix, fresh fruits, specifically blueberries or strawberries. Heck, even a kid's applesauce packet would do, or if you have time and the ability to make like a pre-made, like a vegetable rice bowl that's got like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, carrots, whatever. You can put that in there, and you'll have yourself a good little snack. The final thing to consider to what to be doing that can be helping you out is going to be fluids throughout your day. It's going to be vital to keep yourself hydrated. So like water, S tier by far. Sugar-free sports drinks are borderline S tier, maybe more A tier, depending on what's in them. Any kind of natural, low-added sugar fruit juice are also A tier. Once you start getting into added sugar drinks, that starts to drop it down into like less healthy, less helpful. And then obviously a B or a D tier would kind of like be beer, just kind of like, obviously alcohol impedes the brain's ability to think. It slows down our body. And then really the final F tier is going to be hard liquors during game 1 after maybe you got paired into Brent Simon and he's playing his demons and you lose the roll off and you just kind of say, forget it, we're done. Now, obviously, I'm giving these things as tips for those of us who are trying to improve our record from the last GT, or trying to move up from mid-table to top table or bottom table to mid-table. Now, if you're just like out having fun and you just want to be with the buds, have a good day, roll dice, and just like be there, that's great. Drink beer, have fun. Like, honestly, water would be F tier if that was the case. Like, whatever your goal is for the weekend, I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying that if you would like to improve, these are some good tips to do. The final thing that I want to be talking about is coffee / your caffeine intake. Caffeine is a really hard thing to balance. Most adults I know start their morning by drinking it. So if this is you, make sure to not break that habit the morning of. Like, you do want to keep that routine. It's going to give you a headache if you don't. But also remember that caffeine increases your heart rate, anxiety, and activates almost a borderline fight or flight sequence in our brain if we're overwhelmed. And so we want to make sure that we use it as a tool, not as a crutch during the weekend. So times that it can be helpful, as stated earlier, your normal cup of coffee, and then maybe a half a Red Bull or 12 ounce Americano. They have roughly the same amount of caffeine between like 1 and 3 p.m. So like right after lunch, going into game 5, it's going to hit your system in 30 minutes. And so but make sure that you are drinking your water and eating food while you're going to be taking some form of caffeine, simply because getting caffeine on an empty stomach is going to give you the jitters. It's going to make you not feel good, and it's going to overwhelm your brain with too much information because it's not able to process it due to the caffeine intake. So that's all I've got. We'll see what we got next week. This has been Touching Grass with Ben.
Thanks. Shit, man.
Thanks, Ben. And thanks to the magic of editing, I don't sound like an idiot right now. But GW has dropped some more of these previews for 10th edition here. And it looks like some of them are going to be pretty spicy. They might have been watching a little too much Eddie Izzard when they were writing the rules because they're getting a little too close to the, you've killed 100,000 people? You must get up very early in the morning. What does your schedule look like? Death, 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 afternoon tea? How we doing, guys? What do we think?
So there's a lot to unpack here for sure. The first part, I don't know. GW promised a less lethal game, and the only thing I've seen that's true to that is vehicles are relatively more durable. However, they haven't really increased the damage of classic anti-tank weaponry. So I'm mildly concerned about what happens when someone throws an all-vehicle army at nights, and it plays against an all-infantry army. Like, I'm not sure. I'm concerned whether that is a playable game or not.
But nobody plays Chaos Knights.
Well, I mean,
nobody does that.
The game is less killy if I have all vehicles and you can't kill them, right? It's 50% less killy. It has just become 50% less killy.
There's a little truth to that.
Right. So, I don't know. Just looking back on previous editions when only, like, you had to play tanks and kill other tanks. And comparing that to knights, right? So, say you're playing Tau and you got 3 hammerheads. Your 3 hammerheads kill 2 knights. Okay? The knight player now goes and picks up your 3 hammerheads. You can now no longer kill knights. Concern. And that's my main concern looking at the increased durability of vehicles, is that kind of issue.
Well, and with characters being attached to unit, you'll be able to have Death Stars inside of transports again. It's going to feel like 7th all over again.
Yeah. It does look like it's far more limited than 7th was. From the stuff we've seen, they are limited to a very specific amount of units, a specific types of units they can go into. So hopefully they're significantly more cautious than they were last time with characters and units. Definitely some concern about Death Stars.
Yeah, that was a little bit before my time. I came in at the end of 8th, so I just missed the Castellan meta, because that had just freshly been taken care of when I meandered into 40K. But I know Sean always talks about having Severin Loth. Is that right?
Fuck Severin Loth.
He
had a 2-up invulnerable save. That guy was an asshole.
You know,
guy with the lucky stick.
Yeah, I was like, there's somebody else that I know that has a 2-up invulnerable save that is wandered around just killing random models that it should have no purpose killing. But whatever. Yeah, you complain.
Makari is fair and balanced.
One of the things that I'll touch on before I have to get off, kind of caveating on the leaders and squads and stuff. One, I'm excited to play that because again, I didn't get the opportunity to play that part of a previous edition, so it'll be a learning curve for me. Two, there's a lot of characters that I have, Phobos librarians and regular Primaris librarians and various captain and lieutenant models that I don't ever use because they don't really have a function, at least in the way that I build my army list. So I'm excited to have something new and something fresh to, in the list building stage, at least have in the back of my head, the meta might be a psyker heavy meta, so I might need to take an additional librarian, slot that into, whatever unit it can go in, something that has a lot of shots to use the the sustained hits ability, so you get exploding sixes, in addition to, having the 4 up against psychic damage. Like, I think it just, as a design space, it kind of brings in those models like that are on the fringe use cases in your codex, and like is going to be like, hey, these guys actually have a function now, and I'm pretty excited for that. All of the leader stuff, all of like the what do they call it, devastating hits, the critical hits thing. Like, I love the fact that you can go, cool, here's my answer to like the vehicle issue that we were talking about. Like, I can take something like a chain fist, or I can take something like, I can't remember what else has been teased, but I can take insert unit here with insert weapon option here and tailor that to be like, this is going to be my anti-tank. Like in army building, this is going to be my anti-tank unit, or this is going to function, fill that role for you. So,
speaking on Chain Fist, I'm really curious to see if we keep it at basically capped, because right now it's capped at 1/5 or 2/5 on Raiders, and that's about it on Chain Fist usage. So I'm curious to see if we get more access to it, because that's the only way I've really been seeing for infantry to have reliable damage into vehicles.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so just kind of pushing into this leaders in the unit metric seems really cool for Space Marines. What about factions that and you see a little bit of how they're planning to do it with orcs, with the mechanic dude like hopping in the truck, and like now everybody can shoot out the truck. That's cool.
Open top, baby.
Like I love that kind of a mechanic. Maybe not that one in particular, as it blasts me off the board, but I'm excited, or interested rather, to see how they fold that into armies like Tyranids. I mean, you can kind of see how that transitions over from Space Marines to like Tau. Clearly Chaos Space Marines, right? Like, that's going to be very similar. How's that leader in bed mechanic work in something like Mechanicus, with all of their leaders that wanted to be super fluid and flexible and putting those buffs out, right?
Assume
nothing,
Donald.
But presume everything, right? And make hypotheses about all of the things.
I'll jump in on that real quick. I don't think, and obviously we don't have all the information. I would, as much as it's become a meme in our Discord, I would assume that every codex, every index, every whatever it ends up being, will have some type of so like for Tyranids, like I imagine like a Broodlord could leader in with Gene Stealers, right? Like I think every codex will have something like that.
I actually don't think that's going to happen. The reason I think that is because of the difference in toughness between a Broodlord and a Gene Stealer. Historically. So in 7th edition, which is the last time we had this, there were issues with what was called majority toughness, because any character could go in any unit back then. So looking at the stuff that they've shown off with the Marines, explicitly the characters that they've shown off that aren't Gravis cannot go in Gravis armies or Gravis units. And I think they're trying to stay away from mixing toughnesses and squads because it complicates the game extremely bad.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense, because everything that's been teased has been the same strength and toughness as the unit it's attached with, right? I get you.
Yeah, there used to be an old rule called majority toughness that took care of that, but I guess they're trying to avoid that as much as they can, which makes me kind of curious as to how they're going to do orc war bosses, because boys are T5 and war bosses are T6, so that's going to be a really interesting thing to see how that works.
It's going to be hilarious when war bosses just can't go in units.
What was the other thing that was talked about? They didn't really necessarily say how it would function, but just kind of like dropped like a line of text where it's like, some stuff will have the leader keyword and can be attached to units, but other stuff will just be there to, I think it was like something, quote, support
Right. They did say that not all characters will be able to go into units.
Right. And I would I'm interested to see how GW is going to do that within the design space. Like that'll be exciting to see.
So I want to kind of touch on Psychic, right? Like they dropped some stuff on what Psychic looks like as someone who spent I don't know, half or more of their time playing 40K as a largely Psychic army, and just loved dropping boatloads of mortal wounds on people. I'm not super stoked about those abilities just going into the shooting phase and everybody just having regular saves against those.
I not being a psychic heavy army, what I appreciate it like out of this change is how streamlined how streamlined it appears to be. Where instead of, some armies just don't bring a psyker so they don't care, so it will kind of feel the same to them anyway. But I'm interested to see how they make the change to like your defensive like psychic powers, like where those come in, if it's going to be in the command phase, if it's going to be in the movement phase. But
well, I think a lot of those, dude, are going to just be tied to like the unit that you dropped it in, right?
Yeah, Veil of Time was teased to be the was that the 4-up against psychic, or was that the sustained hits one?
Sustained hits. Also, it was Terminator only. So, so having looked into their other game system, Age of Sigmar, quite a bit, where they do similar things, where they have tons of different wizards, and they all get a special spell on their data sheet. That's what I think it's going to be. Is they're going to split up that spell doctrine that you're spell discipline that you're so used to, and the Primaris will get one spell, the Phobos guy will get one spell, the normal guy will get one spell, and the Terminator guy will get one spell, but they'll be locked into what units they can go into. So I'm interested to see how they end up using those buffs.
Well, as far as
I'm curious to see how that interacts into like Thousand Suns, or Grey Knights, right? Like,
yeah, as far as the weird boy that they previewed specifically, with having to jump on his data sheet at a 2-up, it's going to be an interesting change because it's going to feel more punishing to fail, because a lot of times what you're using to jump for right now is to either remove a unit from combat or to throw a unit across the board to sacrifice them to get like engage, or to throw away and do some trash work. And now that the weird boy has to be in that unit, when you fail to manifest, when you roll that 1 to fail to manifest to jump, the unit is stuck in that combat, and the weird boy's stuck there with him. So you're very likely to just lose that character when you lose that combat, and that's going to feel real bad, as opposed to just having a weird boy 12 inches away, pick a unit up and throw him across the board to get him out of combat, or throw him in a corner,
Well, I think it's double likely you lose the unit if you take D6 mortal wounds when you flub it. Like,
yeah. Speaking of mortal wounds and speaking of models dying, I really just want to see, having picked up Chaos Knights as a second faction to play, I really am interested to see, with the changes to morale, how that is going to function with armies like Chaos Knights or Night Lords, or insert faction here that has mechanics and has warlord traits, relics, etc. That like the Harlequin Death Jester model. That's like, cool. I killed 2 models. That counts as 4 models being dead for morale. Like, interested to see how GW balances those warlord traits, relics, etc. around the new battle shock system. Like, I think there's a lot of really interesting, because losing OBSEC, like anything, the other bullet points in battle shock are bad. Like, obviously you don't want to suffer that, but the moment you go to OC 0, that is game-changing battle shock tests.
I think even worse than that, Ward, or at least equally bad, right? no stratagem support, right? So you go from being able to like, oh, this guy claps back, to like, actually, no, he just dies.
Right, and that's what I mean. Like, it's still bad, but and obviously we don't know what the mission pack's going to look like. But if GW has changed it to where your objective secured or your OC score is a part of your data sheet, I imagine that those missions are pretty well balanced around what your OC score is. So just being like, cool, I have this one dude that's not even meant to hold a thing. Oh, you failed your battle shock test. Now I control this objective.
Well, to be honest, Ward, how I think they balance that is none of those rules exist for the first 3 months of the game. Having played an index before, I think me and Cox are the only one on here that have. But in general, you get almost zero faction special rules. Your warlord traits and relics are extremely limited. I would be very surprised if.
So, like, I wouldn't even have a dread test table.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'll try to dig out one of my old indexes and bring it by to show you sometime.
That might be skewed though, guys, right? Like the old indexes are a good base of jumping off, right? But they've also indicated that the rules are now going to be basically obtainable in 2 pages. So I have to believe that while they can't deliver the full rules, we'll at least have a pared down like subset of like, this is what your armor does. But my also follow-up concern with that is if your rules are contained within 2 pages and they're releasing all the indexes at the front of the system, what's the purpose of buying a codex then? Why would I buy a codex if there's 2 pages of rules here and the rest is just pictures and data sheets that are already available? Like
stratagems, baby.
They're on the 2 pages, Cox.
Yeah, but in the indexes, we didn't get any stratagems. You had command reroll, and that was it.
I expect that we will have... So, in Space Marine Codex dropped at the beginning of 9th, we did put out indexes for non-Codex compliant chapters. And what that looked like was 4 stratagems, 3 warlord traits, 3 relics, factor tactic. That's what you had. That's what I am anticipating for 4 indexes. Because that is the closest thing we've had since then.
Well, it's likely just to be Index Adeptus Astartes, right? Because they're moving away from the chapter system.
Right. I'm just saying that's the most recent thing we've had that's index adjacent. So that's what I'm basing my index assumptions off of.
Right. Assumptions?
And so that's what I assume we'll get in the index. And then when you get a new codex, they will rewrite enough data sheets and strats to make it quote unquote worth buying the book.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, like we've already seen, for example, like Veil of Time, which is a psychic power for Space Marines being baked into a data sheet for the Terminator Librarian, right? We've seen the Jump being baked into a data sheet for an Orc Weird Boy. Right, here's to say that like the Dread Table or something of that ilk is just baked into, the Terror Shades models or the various other War Dog models or Imperial Knight models or whatever, like those type abilities just get baked into a data sheet and it's like, cool, this is what you have. This is what you have to build on.
Yeah, that seems pretty likely.
Yeah, that's something I would expect is they're trying to from 7th through 9th, they have continually removed rules from data sheets and put them into one-cost stratagems that have niche implications. Everything I'm seeing from 10th is removing all these niche stratagems, putting things back onto data sheets to simplify rules to where you just need your book. You're not flipping back and forth. You have your 6-7 data sheets you're playing in your army because 40K is inherently a spam-based game. And then your 2 pages of army rules. It is before the data sheets if the codex is formatted correctly. And that's basically what I expect to see from 10th after hearing what we've been hearing and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's such a complicated game that Warcom can't even get their game system rules right when they're saying about the things that are different. I've had the biggest laugh about them talking about the open top rules, and it's going to be different in 10th because you'll be able to when the transport gets a buffs, the guys inside get a buffs. It's like they don't actually go read their FAQs because, in the 1.6 or 1.7 FAQ, they changed it to where if the transport has a bonus to hit, wound, or damage, the guys inside have the same modifier to hit, wound, or damage. It's like page 8, bullet point 9, something like that.
GW is historically known exactly how their game functions, so... Oh, wait.
Yeah, right.
But...
Cox, I think me and you were the only ones playing when the first time the FAQ that you couldn't move after deep striking. That was in 8th. I remember footage of a finals where someone deep striked a 10-man Chaos Terminator unit 9 inches away, and then warp timed it. And the judge sitting at the table goes, "You can't do that." Judge being a GW employee, and he goes, "Does it say I can't do that?" And 20 minutes later, there was no rule that says he couldn't do that. So he made his 4-inch charge, and it was a good time.
Oh, GW. But, I think I'll leave you guys to it. I'm going to get off here and go spend some time with the wife. But all in all, my take on the 10th edition stuff that's been teased and the 10th edition stuff we've talked about this evening is like, I feel like it's going to be really fun. And once we know everything and can not assume anything, it'll be fun to do like the whole 10th edition power struggle and figure out what's good and actually get like good practice games where like you don't know if a unit's going to be good. You don't know if this composition or this leader in this unit's going to be good. Like that whole rat race is like one of my favorite parts about an edition change. So looking forward to that, and you guys have a good evening.
Yeah, man, enjoy your dinosaurs. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Okay, guys, Daddy's gone, so now we get to talk about all the things we can't while he's here. Like, holy shit, he played the Chaos Knights.
And they are far scarier to me than in Ultras ever were. Ultras are efficient. Ultras shoot good, but Ultras don't have rules. So Chaos Knights have rules that impact the game.
As another army that doesn't have rules, Peyton, that's kind of hurtful.
I mean, I'm sorry we took away all your rules and just gave you really expensive models, but...
Yeah, they took away my rules and doubled the cost of my models. That was pretty sweet.
Speaking of armies that don't have rules, I am going to be doing an army change in 10th edition, so I currently have no rules. Which is an interesting place to be. So what kind of a faction, and do we think, Don, what kind of a faction do we think that I should look at going into 10th?
Oh, shoot, man, you've played orcs for so long. Do you want to go different, or do you want to go, like, I would think as different as you could go would be, like, maybe Custodes, right? Like, hyper elite, super duper tough, like... just layering on thickets of rules on top of other rules that then have rules to them.
So Peyton has suggested that I look at AdMech because he says that I would like Excel in an army form.
Oh God! So you want to go from one army where you painted like 5,000 models to get on the table to another army where you paint 5,000 models to get on the table?
So
yeah.
Let me explain my thought process here just a bit. This conversation came out about a week ago. He was saying he was looking at getting rid of his orcs, wanting to play something different. And it was because we had several conversations in the past where he said that aggressive wall play style of orcs just didn't really mesh. Cox is a relatively conservative player. So he also is wanting to perform relatively well on the hobby track. So I was looking at things like that. AdMech models have very good ways to highlight painter skill, also play a very conservative game plan, and highlight having a plan and executing it properly, which is something Cox is exceptional at. Is exceptional at making the correct flowchart for a game. So that was my thought process when suggesting that to him.
I agree with all of those points, but I would also argue that they're all applicable for Custodes.
Right. So I'm going to counter that just slightly. And this is not meant as a slight towards you, Cox. Custodes have a lot of reactive stratagems that lead to a very adaptive playstyle. Having gone through and debriefed a lot of Cox's games, I've been told that one of the things he struggles with heavily is when a flowchart goes wrong, being able to adapt correctly.
So, yeah, that is absolutely the weakest point of my game, is that once I am off of my pre-programmed flowchart and I'm having to just make decisions in the moment, things get a lot more dicey because I haven't had the time to sit there and pre-plan and figure out all of the math and what's optimal going through every scenario. And I'm just like, I think maybe that kills that. That should kill Trajan Valoris, right? And then it doesn't, and I'm screwed.
So that was one of the reasons I wasn't looking at Custodes, but I definitely could see Custodes being a solid plan for him. And Custodes, if you're not doing a classic paint scheme, if you're going something off the wall where it isn't just gold and highlight color, can look very, very good.
I just think that with the low model count and the wide flat spaces, you have a lot of space to really just show off highlighting, freehanding. You can focus more to each model because you're only doing 20, 25 of them, right? Rather than I got 100 models on the table and I got to make them all look real good. But I do see what you're saying with the reactive playstyle. But I would counterpoint with the AdMech thought of, AdMech go in with a solid, I'm going to do A, B, and C game plan, but it's really exacerbated when they cannot accomplish that game plan, right? They don't have the tools to recalibrate and adjust. Yeah. So, you were completely dependent on that game plan going off.
So that is my one hesitation to suggesting AdMech is it will likely exacerbate the weakness that Cox has there. The faction is very, very good if you have a very rigid plan going in. They are very good at executing the plan. If something goes wrong in executing the plan, the faction as a whole has a hard time pivoting into a new one. So it could combine with already finding that somewhat challenging. So I could see that being an issue, but that was just where my brain immediately went. I think a couple other ones that would be decent, or the elf factions seem solid. And there was one more I was thinking of. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. Oh, Sisters. I do think Sisters also would be very solid for that type of mentality.
I would almost think maybe even Necrons, right? Because you still kind of you're still playing into that, I plan everything out. I know they're not in the best spot right now, right? But you're planning everything out, but you have a lot of redundancies in place with Necrons, right? You're I lost half this unit. Oh, look at that. 5 of them respond. Oh, look at that. I can actually just revive 10 dudes. That's pretty cool.
How good are Necron vehicles?
They're not terrible.
Historically, the Annihilation barges have been pretty good. Historically, their transport has been very solid.
Is there transport up top?
It's not, but it counteracts that by reviving 10 dudes.
Yeah.
5 dudes? Yeah. It revives an amount of dudes.
It revives dudes and it has a bunch of guns. Also, they have a character vehicle that is very good.
with 10th increasing the relative toughness and effectiveness of vehicles, right? It's like if I'm going to be army swapping into a faction, I kind of want them to have a reasonable selection of vehicles to choose from. And AdMech seems to have an okay selection. Custodies not so much. Necrons do have a pretty reasonable selection of vehicles from what I remember. I know they've got the big crescent thing that you want to make into a sandwich.
I mean, Ghost Arcs are real solid, and if they happen to get the firing deck treatment and a little bit more versatility of them, of being able to throw like a destroyer in there or something like that, I mean, that's going to be a friggin' deadly mix.
Yeah, I know we haven't talked about any of those rules, and I know Cox has talked to me about enjoying the aesthetic and playstyle of elves, but I can see a very aggressive mechanized Eldar gunline being very good going forward. Falcon has a rule that if it hits with one of its range weapons, the army can reroll wounds against that target.
Is it the army or the unit that disembarked from the Falcon?
Sure, either way. It's insert 11 good shooting models should kill anything of relevance.
Fair enough.
That in mind, I also do think Doom is probably on its way out from Eldar. I don't think that's the Farseer's buff anymore with seeing that on the Falcon, but we'll see. But I think that could be a very interesting playstyle going forward for Eldar.
Yeah. No, and I think there's some other interesting breaks that might come out of this transport meta, right? Like, well, meta, presumably, right? Who's excited to see 6 rhinos with 2 Miltas shooting out of each one of them, zooming across the table at you?
That has me a little concerned. But if you are listening to the podcast and you have input on which army I should try to pick up in 10th, get in the comments and let me know your opinion on that. If you would please, I would certainly appreciate it. But continuing along with our 10th edition stuff here, the firing deck stuff is interesting. The transport stuff is interesting. The character stuff is interesting, and the psychic stuff is interesting. But the AP reduction on the weapons is something that we've wanted for a while, and I think that's kind of sailing under the radar with everything else that we're looking at.
I mean, I'm super excited about the AP reduction until we see T12 rhinos or whatever it was.
Only a T9 rhino, but AP reduction is relevant. At the same time, they're reducing how cover functions. So obviously AP, like Terminators will be significantly more durable. And things like that. Honestly, things like Eliminators seem less durable because they can like the best they can ever do is roll a 3+ for saves while in cover. So, looking at, obviously we don't have the exact rule yet, but that's how it read to me. So they're talking about how models that didn't have a 2+ save could never save on 2s from cover. The new terrain rules combine seem to somewhat offset the reduction in AP from guns, at least in my view.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, but it also looks like vehicles are going to be applicable for cover in some of these cases.
Yes. Going through that, it looked like I think they called barricade and fuse and like fuel lines and stuff like that, what they called the smaller ruins that weren't 5 inches tall. So those in hills grant cover to infantry models. When they were talking about ruins themselves, they just said models get the benefits of cover, which seems cool. If big bugs and rhinos and knights and stuff can get covered, that's interesting.
I mean, I'm in for it.
The return of vehicles getting cover plus the combination of them having a higher toughness is going to make them really difficult to crack in some instances. And it might return to like seeing gunliney vehicle stuff that posts up behind ruins and exposes a corner. Hopefully they don't decide to put firing arcs back. Hopefully they've learned from that mistake.
Please do not bring firing arcs or armor values back. We have moved on. Luckily, they've shown vehicles having a toughness value, so we should be good on armor values.
Yeah, we can just hope that they decide that firing arcs were a bad idea. There's left by the wayside is the best place for them. But On that note, do we have any other thoughts on the updates that we've been shown for 10th edition this time around?
I am really excited to see more Tyranid models. Like, they've shown us 62 different new Marines that all look like the old Marines. But, like, where's my new bugs?
I've seen exactly one new Tyranid unit. It's the first new Tyranid non-character release in 3 editions. So, it's a plus. It's a plus.
They did show us new Termagants that are the same unit, but at least a new sculpt, which is the new.
I was talking about the Death Leaper.
The newest sculpt they've seen.
The 3-man Death Leaper squad.
Yeah, no, I know what you were talking about, man. Like, Don's Leapers. Yeah, I know.
But the new Gaunt models also look good. I'm holding off on buying more Gaunts because I don't want to assemble Gaunts and then have to rebase Gaunts.
Gaunts and then more Gaunts. I mean, I'm excited for the starter box, but I don't know how many I want to buy if it's just going to end up with me having 412 Gaunts.
But what if Gaunts are good?
But you still can't run 400 of them.
They're going to be dirt cheap anyway because everybody's going to buy the Marine side of the box and there's just going to be a ton of Tyranids floating around. It's like what happened with the Necrons last time.
Cha-ching, baby.
All right. Well, on that note, then, Don, hit the outro music. Let's get out of here. If you're still with us, maybe something about this episode was interesting to you. If it was, please consider hitting like, commenting, and maybe clicking that subscribe button. It only takes a couple seconds, but it means the world to us. If you know somebody that you think this might help or that would be entertained by our ramblings, then please share this with them and continue to give us your feedback on how we can continue to improve. We do appreciate that very much. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.